Adrian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for gifting us with some of your time today.
Oh my gosh, very happy to be here. Love getting to know you as a preamble to this time together. So excited to get to know you. I know you really honor your listeners, so hopefully I'll say something that's helpful.
Oh, I know you will. I was binge listening to some of your other interviews, so I'm really excited for this. Before we get into kind of the meat of the questions, would you tell our audience a little bit about who you are and who you serve? A little bit of your story?
Sure, I'll try to be brief. My name's Adrian Koehler. Just about to turn 45. I have a couple young kids, 11-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl, and they are essential to my world. Divorced a couple times, so been through the ringer. Sometimes the ringer that I created. I mean, I guess I'm a hyper responsible guy, so I say I created both ringers. All that to say, I've been through a lot. I've learned a lot. Now I coach leaders, mostly founder-driven companies, but I've worked with leaders for a long time. I've been coaching leaders in this way for about 15 years and have a handful of companies that does that in a few ways called Take New Ground, and some variations off that, like takenewground.com if you want to check that out. But I've always been into people. Always been into people. I came small town America, 8,000 people in my hometown. Two school teacher parents, both leaders in the local church. They helped plant the church that like I don't know, maybe a year before I was born, and so I just grew up in this church, and so it was a big part of my life growing up. And then um, I say I grew up in like an episode of Friday Night Lights. I was the quarterback guy with the girl for the whole thing, and
Nice.
then moved on and played football in college in the middle of Illinois and moved to Chicago. I was an intensive care nurse, mostly in a pediatric hospital. But my passion was always for activism and making a difference in the world. And I think because I came from that, I guess, evangelical framework, a lot of that worked for me. Some of it didn't. But I moved out to Los Angeles and was a part of a kind of a renegade church called Mosaic, that did stuff that most folks wouldn't think about doing for the sake of reaching folks. Even being in LA is weird, but we
Yeah.
had like a 3,000 person church, and my job ended up being like mobilizing 2,000 of those folks to go make a difference both here and abroad. So spent most of my 20s and 30s building leadership teams to go make a difference and motivating people and speaking on stage and that kind of thing. And then worked in the prison system. Ran a $50 million foundation. Started it with a guy that I helped lead him to a faith conversation, and then he wanted to give his money away. So we
Oh,
went and
wow.
worked and ran leadership trainings in the prison system that were highly effective, all with murderers, and then we trained them how to be leaders, and through that was trained how to do the work I do now. So I love it. I get to talk with leaders about the most important conversations every single day, and I get challenged. I learn a lot, and I'm always convicted. And this is who I am. So I'm glad to get
Mhm.
paid for who I am.
I love that, and I just a plug from what I've listened to so far of you. You're a authentic, no nonsense kind of guy. Like you said,
Yep.
you take responsibility even when you describe it having had two divorces, and um, that seems to be the reason for the positive trajectory you're on and what influences your coaching. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
well, I admire that. Like I just admire the courage and the ownership in I believe that our life experience is to sort of quote kind of Viktor Frankl, and our life experience is largely around our perception, how we choose to respond to it versus the circumstance itself. And I hear
100%.
that infiltrating the messages um, around your leadership coaching too.
Well, and I won't be too long-winded about stuff like this, but even the circumstances are up for grabs, meaning
Yeah.
that like there is something that happened.
Yeah.
Like let's say your parents were divorced when you were 5, or your dad died when you were 12, or your mom was a raging, horrible person, or but whatever the thing was, you got hit by lightning, whatever. So there's a thing that happened, and what it
Yes.
means is literally up to you, period.
Yes.
Most folks aren't willing to like explore that possibility because there's so many benefits to believing that the thing that happened caused me to be who I am, which is
Hmm.
usually a scapegoat conversation that Sigmund Freud, decided he convinced us of. It's called an etiological view. I am the effect, history is the cause. That's why most therapy is exploring when you were 5 and what happened and why you don't trust your husband now because your dad was
Yeah.
a blah blah blah. No, you decided that. and there are
Yeah.
payoffs to that. And anyway, so I'm with Frankel.
Yeah. So probably that's a decent kind of introduction to the first question is what do you think is the secret to being an exceptional leader as we apply that your philosophy to leadership?
What do I think is the secret to being an exceptional leader? Hmm. Well, that's interesting. Even I wonder why to be exceptional. I would aim, I guess, for effective versus exceptional.
Yeah.
Um, and what does that do? That actually forces somebody to get really clear about what they're up to.
Mm-hmm.
So effectiveness isn't an operational stance, it's a commitment. So most folks are struggling where they are because they haven't been willing to claim the aim that they are. And I'm going to say stuff in a weird way, but I'm just saying it as it is for me.
Yeah.
Like if I like let's say I'm running a business and I'm not the owner of the company, but I'm a CEO and I'm being paid to like, generate $20 million of business this year. That's the like if I want to, that's the aim. It might have been like the goal. Like that's why I never
Mm-hmm.
use the word goals with people because goals are usually very objective and like outside of people. I'm
Yes.
not a work-life balance guy, meaning that most people use that framework to justify not being committed to work or the reason why they were a bad husband and wife. So that's a
Yeah.
whole that whole conversation is a scapegoat. I'm a work-life, integration guy. So when
Mm-hmm.
I say the aim that they are is like, am I really committed to doing that or not? And most folks won't, ask themselves that question in a real way because they want to do it, but there are if they're committed to it, like i.e. they are it, then there are conversations and actions that will seem like a big threat to them
Mm-hmm.
and will seem very risky
Mm-hmm.
that they'd have to take in order to deliver on the commitment. So if I'm an effective leader, first thing I'm going to do is get really clear about what I'm really about. And where am I lying to myself? Where am I lying to other people? Meaning, and most folks, especially good meaning folks, like I'm also thinking about, my Midwestern roots. We don't,
Yeah.
we don't want to be a liar.
Us people pleasing folks.
Us, yeah. Well, it's like I get it. I grew up like that. So I have no trouble, I have no problem with wanting to see in my life where I'm lying to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? Well, let's just take it back to the good Lord Jesus. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not if I'm not messed up, why do I need him anyway?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right. Why do
most
we need a
most
savior?
yeah, most well-meaning folks that are pretty religious, which I have no judgment for them, but I'm with that. Like I grew up in that. So it's like we try really hard. I say this sometimes, like in my family, there was two games: either be good or act like it,
Yeah. Or
which
be
is
good at it.
yeah, be good at looking like it, right? And I'll just hide all the stuff and not talk to anybody and feel a bunch of
Yeah.
shame and hope, all we just, wear all that and then we spend a whole lifetime hiding. So my point is like if like I might be lying to myself and I don't put that in a bad category. I put that in the possibility category. It's like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not telling myself the truth and I want to be an effective leader, I want to know that. So anyway, in effect, what sets you apart is first off get really clear on the aim. Like, what am I actually about? And if you don't know what that is, just look back at the last year. That'll tell you what you've been about.
Yeah.
Like results tell the truth. We don't. That's what I say.
Yeah.
We always want to say we've got good intentions and I intended to do this, but
We're
it didn't happen.
trying.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
trying. That's another thing too. So I say that impact equals intention. Like what happens, reality, is the intention, not I wish it would have or I wanted to and it didn't work out. That's what we tell ourselves to justify it. So, as you could tell, if you're in a conversation with me, it's kind of absurd and no holds barred. But like that's
I love that.
but leaders that want to be effective decide to look at things in a distinct way. So, let me be more short-winded. So, get really clear about the aim. Get really sober about reality.
Mm-hmm.
Most folks like to talk about the future because it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
And the future is a fantasy. It's not here yet. So we could say whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the harder thing for folks is look at today in a sober view and say, hey, what's actually not consistent with the future that I say I want?
Yeah.
So I want to have a great team. Well, let's just say let's look at our team now. And what am I tolerating? What conversations am I not having that I know if I was responsible, I ought to be having?
Yeah.
And, how am I justifying that? And what am I not deciding to have a conversation about? And I'm blaming it because I don't know how to. That's what we tell ourselves. Like I would, but I don't know how to have it, the conversation. So, or waiting for the right time. That's what people love to say.
Hmm.
But usually it's just a lack of courage
Yeah.
because you don't need to know how to have the conversation. You ought to go learn. I mean, there's lots of ways to learn it. Like people hire me to learn how to do it. But even if you can go let's say you're running a business and your salesperson hasn't hit the numbers, you don't need to know anything beyond like, hey, Tom, we're missing the numbers. I don't understand what's going on. Can you teach me about it? And is there a way that you see we could fix this problem?
Yeah.
And let's just say next month, like what number would you need to hit next month to like be on the road to success? Oh, good. And then set the meeting for the next month at the exact same time and look at the results. Like that's not a complicated conversation.
Right.
So, but there's reasons why we avoid that, and then aren't effective leaders. So,
Yeah.
if you're willing to have a candor conversation about the future, if you're willing to have a conversation with you and others about commitment, then you're gonna be effective, more effective probably than where you are now. No matter where you are,
Hmm.
you're gonna be more effective than where you are now.
And are there times that being effective may mean being unpopular?
Almost always.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well,
Because you're
I don't know if I
confronting
don't know if
that.
unpopular. I mean, it just depends on the culture that you've created.
Sure.
So, like on my team, we play a different game than most teams. So, it's not even about popularity. What is popularity? Popularity is what people liking you. Is that what that means?
Yeah, I guess. In other words, you might tick some people off, like if
Yeah.
there's some cleaning house that goes on.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great. Yeah. So most folks don't set the table in this way. Meaning if you're going to work for me, or on this team, if you're going to be on this team, hey, the game inside the game is we're going to consistently strive to improve and evolve as human beings.
Hmm.
And if we do that, we're going to become comrades. Like we're going to be teammates. Like we're going to love each other deeply and get in the foxhole and take the hit for each other. And we're
Yeah.
going to take on, challenges for the sake of each other. Like I love you so much, I'm going to tell you the truth. Like that's how we are with each other. And then because of that
Yeah.
and the teaming that is that, we are going to get phenomenal results. And when we don't, we're going to work together, examine what's missing, call each other on it, tell each other the truth, and we'll do that. And then we're going to like learn whatever's wanted and needed to get to new results. If I'm doing that, then if someone's upset with me, it works. That's cool because they're not upset with me. They're upset with the conversation that I am.
Right.
And that's a weird phrase, but that's like if you and I were teammates and let me flip it around. You and I are teammates and I'm blowing it. And we've had all those conversations we just had. And you come to me and say, hey, Adrian, I noticed that meeting you just had was like totally a flop. Like, are you okay? And if
Yeah.
I'm offended by you, that's on me
Yeah.
because you're committed to my meetings being effective. And you noticed, at least per your assessment, that my meeting wasn't effective and I just mailed it in and you're committed to me. So the question isn't what did Adrian do wrong? Is Adrian okay? Is your
Right.
question.
Yeah.
Right? So if you build this culture, then a broken commitment is actually a cry for help, not a problem. It's like an
Mm.
invitation. Like
Hmm.
that's what we say all the time. But most teams do not generate team culture based on commitment. It's just based on job descriptions and,
Yeah.
superficial relationships, not commitment to one another. That's why it becomes a popularity contest and who likes who and all that kind of political stuff instead of what are we here to get done and am I committed to you or not?
Right.
So anyway, that like that. So yes, if you show up as a commitment, you will naturally disrupt, the system. What have I?
Hmm.
There's an old phrase I said I used to say a long time ago that uh, a person that's committed to success will always offend those committed to mediocrity.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Well, and how much do you see that? Well, I guess I should ask first, what are because in this conversation, I hear, correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the biggest things that hold people back from being that effective leader is fear. And oftentimes that fear of not having approval. What have you seen in your experience are the biggest fears that keep people from fully stepping into the most effective version of their leadership?
It's a great question. The assumption behind the question is the first problem.
That I'm not correct in my assumption.
No, no, no. It's not that you're
Oh,
not correct. You're actually very accurate with the thinking that with the way that humans naturally think about it, especially this day and age. So
yeah.
I'll stop being weird. So you said, what holds people back is fear, and what are the fears that hold people back? There's an assumption in there, and if this is a coaching call, we play with it, which would be fun. But for the sake of time, the assumption is that the fear is the thing holding the person back, right? Do you hear that in the question?
Yes,
That
yes,
the
right.
person is held back. And what's holding the person back? You know what's
The
holding the
per
person
the
back
person.
is fear. Fear is the villain in the story.
Oh, not the
Very,
person.
very
Yeah,
common view.
yeah,
And it's not that it's not that way. It's like, yes, yes, there is, like, that might be the thing that's holding me back, but actually, what's the most true thing? Like, that is the true thing. But what's the most true thing is that I think that fear is a problem. I think that
yeah,
fear is like the purpose of fear is, I mean, naturally, the purpose of fear is to protect me, right? That's why
right.
we fear things.
So
Like,
there's a payoff.
well, for
Thing.
sure.
Yeah.
But so naturally, people they like when I'm scared, we're all doing this, me too, right? So, like when I'm scared, my brain is telling me, first off, be alerted. Second, protect yourself.
Yes.
And third, like, identify the threat, take effective action, all that. Now, that's
Right.
just wiring, right? Like, that's the
Right.
gravity for human being. That's just
Right.
survival, is don't get near the thing I'm scared of.
Mm-hmm.
Most folks don't do the math on that and realize that some of that's like, even though it's natural, it's not the most helpful view.
Right.
So your question of like, what are the fears that hold people back? First off, I would say, what is the relationship to fear that holds people back? Which is that
Mm-hmm.
fear is the worst thing on the planet. And I
Mm-hmm.
would say that fear is an invitation to explore what's there, and is it worth it to live in courage? That's what I mean, really.
Right.
That's how
Yeah.
I relate. I used to have a
That's so much more eloquent. Yes.
Well, I
True.
used to have a
It
little
really is true.
podcast called Fearless Leadership, which, I didn't put enough money in to make it effective, but this was the conversation about all the conversations I had on there, which was, how can we relate to fear in such a way that it's an invitation? Because it's a summoning to the surface. Like, we know this. Like any great moment in time, you I'll be superlative for a second, which obviously isn't true all the time, but here's what I would assert, just for the sake of the conversation, is like the most of the great moments in time, the person in it was scared, and
Did it anyway.
I was going to say shitless, but let me beep. It's like we're scared, right? And I know that in my own life is that the great moments, I overcame the fears and the concerns that made most people not do it,
Right.
right? So,
And there are always the times in our lives where we grow the most.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Like if I'm willing to put myself at stake, and if, for those listening from a faith-filled conversation, that's why I like Doug moving out here to California, because I was on a team in India, and I just showed Tanya some pictures, which was kind of fun. I was on a team in India, and they gave me a talk like on a CD. Remember that? They gave me like a sermon
Mm-hmm.
on a CD with this guy Erwin McManus, which lots of people don't like him because he's quite controversial. Anyway, but the talk was called The Barbarian Way Out of Civilization, which
Mm.
essentially the premise of it was Jesus didn't come to create a religion, he came to start a revolution.
Yes.
Which is, and this whole community of Mosaic was that faith and risk are friends.
Mm-hmm.
And in most, religious or faith contexts, those are not true, because most, religious contexts are about what do we know, how are we
Mm-hmm.
right about it,
Mm.
How do we get other people to agree with us? And in the
Mm-hmm.
meantime, we'll stay and do stuff in the church building, and that's it.
Yeah.
And which is whatever, go for it. But I was compelled, obviously, because I was like a rebellious youngster in 25. I was like, oh wow, now that's a thing. So let's say that we used to have all these mantras like the church isn't here for me. We are the church. We're here for the world. And so
Yeah.
I'm going to go out and like have be and hang out with people that are really dangerous.
Right.
And you know, kind of like
Because they're the ones that need Jesus.
well, it's kind of like Jesus did. He's not hanging out with the Sadducees and the Pharisees.
Right.
He's out there hanging out with the prostitutes and tax collectors,
Right.
and he must have cared at least a little bit less about what the religious folks thought about him.
Amen.
And, that was always the moment from scripture. If I could be there, it's like at the table, like when they're all there together, like what's the conversation at the table? With
Yeah.
him and all, when Mary Magdalene came, wiped his feet with perfume and that whole scene. It's like, I want to know that. Like, what's the
Yeah.
convo? So anyway, let me get back to a useful point, which is if you're gonna, so the question's about fear. And if you come from a faithful um, context, some people are going to worship. I saw it this way, like people would say like, oh, I didn't have peace about it, so I didn't do it. And then they
Mm.
said that that was like God. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say, oh, no, no, that was you.
Yeah.
Let's just say God's here to actually be God,
Yeah.
which is you're going to be okay. You're going to like throw yourself
Yeah.
at something because I think that's the most faithful thing to do is to trust God enough to take a risk instead of
Yeah.
hide behind piety and not take a risk and like call it peace and whatever. People worship
Yeah.
peace a lot, which is like a very interesting,
Yeah.
odd thing. It's not odd. It's just like that. Oh, I feel safe is what that means. I feel like I'm
Right.
not going to fail. And that's what God wants me to do. And I say the opposite. Obviously, God killed his son
Yeah.
for us. That's a pretty big, is that a failure or not? You know, or was it a purposeful loss?
Right.
That's the interesting question. So, anyway, your question was, what are the typical fears? The
Well,
four
I feel
survival.
like that wasn't even the right question now. Sorry, now
Well,
I'm
it's not. No,
interrupting.
it's an important question because people usually think about it that way. Like, what's holding me back? And they're going to give an
Yeah.
emotional answer to that.
Yeah.
Because fear is only an emotion, right?
Imagine.
It's not like a
True.
thing, it's an interpretation of a thing.
Right.
We always say that emotions are just thoughts trapped in the body looking for language. So, like, what am I
Mm-hmm.
swhich of? It's a great
Mm-hmm.
question. Let's say I'm scared and I'm using my old thoughts about that to justify me not taking new action,
Yeah.
which is essentially what when I'm stuck, quote unquote, I'm using a definition of reality to justify my lack of commitment that would get me into action. That's what that
Yeah.
means, really. But we don't
Yeah.
say it weird like the way Adrian thinks about it. But I would just say I'm more accurate than I'm stuck. I don't think anybody's ever stuck. I think people love to be where they are. But you know
Right.
why? Because they're there.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't love being there, they'd be somewhere else,
Right.
right? So now
True.
that's weird. That's weird. I think it's accurate. It's also very weird.
It
If you
is
just
true.
if you decide to own it, you become more alive.
Yes.
Can I get an amen? Anybody listening still? Have
Amen.
I offended any folks? Come on. No problem. Love you.
Sometimes we need some shaking up.
Yeah. Um, so what are the typical fears? Well, we talk about, by we I mean my team and where we come from and the work we do. Um, there are four main survival needs, which is part of this answer, which is good to talk about. That every human being, you don't get a vote on it. It's happening. This is my assertion. You don't have to believe me. Just listen just for a second. My assertion is that every human being is in pursuit of these four survival needs: looking good,
Mm.
feeling good, being right, being in control.
Yeah.
Even when we're a people pleaser, listen,
Yep.
that's a part of feeling good.
Yep.
I'm doing it because I look like I'm a nice person. You're
Yep.
not like you're not sweet and caring, because I can be a people pleaser. I can lie to them and to myself for the sake of continuing the pattern of the relationship that feels like stability. That's essentially what people pleasing is, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be honest now, and I'm going to be angry. Usually nice people.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of
There's
nice
there's some
guys.
anger. There's some anger down deep in there.
Resentment is building, and it always blows up. And it's justified because I've been lying to myself, and now they've been taking advantage of me, quote
Yeah.
unquote. People that are listening
Yeah.
can't see me put that in quotes. They've been taking advantage of me, so now I get to, every people pleaser, including me, that's played that role at times, is entitled to do what they want later, because
Mm.
you know what? They've been mistreated, and
Mm-hmm.
now they deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't say it that way, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are a lot of the fears. The other fear. I mean, rejection. I mean, there's just human stuff. Like rejection is a big deal.
Mhm.
Wanting to preserve their own view of themselves, which is part of the looking good thing. Oh, if they there's like there's definitely a whole category of, if I were to reinvent myself, I
Mhm.
would have to give up on the stories about my past that I've leaned on. Is that the word? Leaned on for a long time.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
So let me give an example because that's weird to talk about. Let's just say that, what's an approachable one? Um, there's a lot that come to mind. I just want to find the juiciest one for folks. Let's just, this is maybe it's the most universal. I grew up in I could use this. I grew up in a small town. My parents like, simple folks. Simple, I just mean straightforward. They taught for 35 years. Great
Mhm.
folks in the community, and but I might not. I might just say, you know what? I'm just not a risk taker
Yeah.
because I wasn't born that way. I'm like, whatever, small town boy. I grew up
Yeah.
chewing tobacco and throwing the football, right? So, what am I doing? Meeting with a guy that's running $100 million company. Like I shouldn't do
Yeah.
that. I don't belong here. What? Okay, good. So I'm deciding that about the future, and because why? Because I'm like simple folk. I'm not smart enough. I'm not sophisticated. Da, 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 da. So if you take a risk, you might have to give up on the story that's very
Mm.
convenient for you. It's like a nice shelter,
Yep.
you know? But if you give up on the story and say, hey, you know what? I am what I'm committed to. I'm not what happened or what I've decided about what happened.
Mhm.
That's a gutsy move. So
Mhm. So
let me,
how do you
yeah.
oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, I was just thinking, let me give this because I've talked for a while here and maybe scattered the all over. My summary would be, fear is not a thing. Fear is an interpretation, which we sometimes call an emotion, of a thing. It's good to explore fear, like listen to
Yeah.
it. It has things to tell you, things that are important to you, that might even be sacred to you, that if it was actually true, it would actually disgrace you because you
Yeah.
say, I'm a person of faith, but I'm actually not. In this
Yeah.
way, like I'm actually worshiping me not looking bad with my friends, or me
Yes.
not failing in front of my husband or wife, or me not even quote unquote disappointing God, which I don't know if is possible. It's like I'm
Yeah.
doing that instead of what I think I am. So like listen to fear, honor it. Like the fear is not your enemy.
Yeah.
Fear is like, it's almost like
Yeah.
indicator lights on your car dashboard.
Right.
Like, uh-oh, something's off.
Right.
I
Get
should listen to
curious.
this. Get curious
Yeah.
about it. And then talk to somebody that's honest with you.
Yeah.
Not your friend that thinks you're awesome. Your friend that like annoys you with his or her
Right.
questions.
It tells you when you got a booger hanging out your nose
That's
or
right.
yeah.
Hey, how am I lying to myself? That's a fun question to ask a friend. If as you listen to me tell the story, how am I lying to myself? And then just listen. And wherever you're defensive, that's where it's true.
Mm, that's so good.
All
Well,
right.
that you may have
Nice.
just answered the question. So I was going to say, when you walk into the room with that executive leader, that frontline leader that is, quote, stuck in that place and clinging to that story, how do you help them navigate out of that place?
Well, first off, do they want to get somewhere new? That's the first question.
Yeah.
Because I can't help them get anywhere they don't want to go. I mean, I'm pretty motivational. I'm pretty inspiring.
Yeah, you
I'm
are.
pretty, I can help and I can move somebody and I can, influence, whatever. I can do all that. But if I'm actually going to serve them, the first question is, what do you actually want to get done?
Mm-hmm.
They'll tell you they're all victim story about where things are and where they had to be that and this happened, whatever. Humans are going to do what humans are going to do, which is
Yeah.
justify the present by looking to the past.
Mm-hmm.
And most folks are not going to put their name on things.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's just human, right? So I know that's going to happen, and I can do that too. I don't most often just because I'm really committed to this stuff. But anyway, I'm listening for it when I lie to myself, which I did, right? When I was starting this thing, I was like, oh yeah, whatever I said about the ringer, like I was put through the ringer. No, no, no. I created the ringer and I put myself through it. That was crazy.
Yeah.
So anyway, first off, I'm going to listen for their story about what's happening. It's gonna be victimized naturally as a human. Like it happened to me. The
Yeah.
circumstance, created the thing. As you and I were talking, the job market and the whole thing is because I'm listening. I'm thinking very differently than how you were thinking about how to be in those interviews, which we don't have to get into for the sake of time. But it's
Yeah,
a,
I already I could feel I'm like, oh, he's picking right up on this and has
oh,
some
I'm
good
picking
coaching
up on it.
ideas.
Oh, because of post-COVID, let me do
Oh, I
15 seconds.
know. I'm like,
Because of
oh, can we back
post-COVID,
it
they're
up?
they're interviewing us. I'm like, well, maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe that what used to be called an interview shouldn't be called an interview anymore. Meaning,
Yeah.
if you want to work here, I mean, how good do you want to be? That's the question for the person I'd be interviewing. It's like, hey, you know what? You could pick your spot. We're probably not your spot. Unless you want to be on a team that helps you be the person you want to become. Unless you
Oh,
want to be challenged. If you don't want to be challenged, cool. Awesome. Don't work
yeah.
here. Go work somewhere else. But
Yeah.
we're only looking for elite players, not brilliant, but committed. That's what like, that's the thing. That's what the Navy
Yes.
SEALs know is like committed.
Committed.
Trust over competency always.
For
Because
always.
you can teach people stuff, right? They can
Yeah.
learn info. I mean, I was a nursing major. I didn't know anything. I mean, whatever. I went 4 years of nursing college, I learned more in the first 6 months than I ever learned in nursing college, right? So you learn stuff that's real on the ground. But commitment is the X factor. So I
Mhm.
would interview them for who they want to become, not the job they want.
Yeah.
That's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
They're having the same one with most people. But if you want to stand out, say, hey, people that work here, we're here because we love people. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to love people, all good. Like go somewhere else. But if you want to like become this type of person, come work with us. We're
Mm-hmm.
distinct. So,
Is it the same conversation for people that are already here?
yeah,
You
I would
know,
have the same conversation because
yeah.
you can't promise that unless the culture lives it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've
Yeah.
worked in healthcare for a long time. I know kind of the natural kind of bitchiness of a very female-driven environment, if that
Yeah.
works out okay. It's like there's a thing, right? There's like, it's different. Put 20 guys in a room, it's going to be a certain way. Put 20 women in a room, it's going to be a certain way, naturally.
Yeah.
So it's not
Right.
like one's worse than the other. There's just distinction.
For sure.
And usually my experience is healthcare workers don't take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Yeah.
feel like, especially because they're in it to care for the people, they can't take care of themselves until they've met all the needs of the world, which obviously won't ever happen.
Yeah.
And anyway, there's a bundle of conversations there. But yeah, and especially we will typically tolerate toxic people because we know them.
Yeah.
And take a risk to like have a conversation with the person about their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And we would rather not because we don't want to lose them, especially because there's no people, quote unquote, no people to hire these days. So we need that
Right.
person. But actually, that person is why nobody actually wants to work here or won't work here very long
Yeah.
because of the weight behind them, like the natural
The
toxicity
toxicity.
of
Yeah.
how it's not like who they are. I'm always making the distinction between who someone is and how they're behaving. Like there's two different things. There's a pattern of behavior, and then
Yeah.
there's who the person is. Like a toxic, quote unquote, toxic person is not a toxic person. They've decided to become toxic for a reason. What's the reason? That's the
Mm-hmm.
question to get to. Like,
Mm.
why does this type of behavior make sense to you?
Yeah.
Like that's the question
Right.
that a leader ought to ask is like, hey, you keep burning through employees and you think it's them, but there's a pattern here. Can we talk about it? Because I can't, I mean, as a boss, I can't afford it. It costs me a lot of money every time I have to hire somebody new.
Yeah.
I care about you. You're really smart. There's something going on. Can we talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
Now you asked a question. And I got way off on that.
No, I think you answered it.
Oh, did I? Okay, good.
Well, you answered the question that needed to be answered, right?
Yeah, what we're talking about. Oh, hold on. I remember now. What would I say? If I was in the room with the leader, that's where it came, because I
Oh,
went off
that's
on the
right.
circumstantial
Yeah.
thing and I started picking on you for a second. So, but just
I
normal.
needed the
That's not.
picking on, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, yes. Well, that's a meta conversation is that life is hard now after COVID and therefore we can't and therefore it's hard, which is the whole thing and you'll prove it right. Like your brain is a passive writer. So whatever you decide is true, your brain will
Yeah.
prove it. So
Yeah.
it's not like that's what it is. It's like that's actually what I want it to be, which is a weird thing to entertain. How do I want the post-COVID world to be a horrible place to be in?
Yeah.
That's a risky question.
Right.
But your question was, how do I help somebody? So come in, get real with like, where do you want to go? And I'm going to be listening to somebody about how they're going to complain about what's happening now, and about usually about 14 minutes into the convo with a stranger, I'll say something like, we've known each other for 14 minutes. Can I take a risk with you? And they'll say yes, of course. And I'll say, well, I think you want it to be this way. And they'll say, oh, no, I don't want it to be this way. And I'll say, let's just say that having a toxic, leadership team has benefits to it. Let's talk about that for a second. And they'll say, it doesn't have any benefits, of course. I know. Yes, of course. I get it. So we're going to play a game. Let's say there are some benefits to having a toxic team. What are the benefits? There are tons of, I can make a list of 20 right now. Um, and then we'll do all that. So, and then we'll do hey, let's just say that there are payoffs to that too. I'm sorry, what are the prices to that? We'll do all that. And so therefore they get to entertain the idea, which it takes some guts to do it, entertain the idea that I like it this way. And here are the prices I'm paying for liking it to be this way. Because if I have a toxic team, I'm less responsible, right? I'm not on the hook. It's the
Mhm.
team, right? That's one thing.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
they're not performing, I get to blame it on them. There's the problems are so immense. There's no way I could, get close to them. And so I get to justify not, handling things at a small level. It's everything's at a big level. Anyway, for just a couple examples. And if they don't want to entertain that, I'm of no help to them
Yeah.
because there's no solution until we understand the how the problem was generated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like you could put a solution in the context of the old thinking that generated the problem, but soon then the solution is going to be the next problem. And why? Because the thinking that generated the problem wasn't assessed, identified, disrupted, owned, regenerated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Takes
I'm
a
gonna
whole lot of
land that way.
humility.
Yeah.
Humility and vulnerability and yeah.
Yeah, and my experience and why I like working with, why I like working with type A leaders is that most of them have trained people not to tell them the truth. They
Mm.
won't say it that way. You know what they'll say? It's lonely at the top.
Mm.
But it's lonely at the top is code for I have trained people not to tell me the truth. So I come in, guns blazing, just because if the person doesn't want to have a real conversation, I don't want to talk to them every week. Like
Yeah.
I'm not here to you know,
Boring.
yeah. I mean, I won't be used that way,
Yeah.
or I'm also not going to kiss their butt and keep doing this stuff that hasn't been working. Like we need to get real here. So
Yeah.
that's what I do. And folks that that want a shift, they want the truth, because as the old
Yeah.
rabbi said, the truth will set you free. And I think people are dying for freedom, but
Yes.
avoid the truth and can't find it.
Amen. Boy, that's preach, brother, preach.
You could tell. Actually, I was just, I forget what the conversation was, but I've got my grandfather's Bible right next to me.
Oh, how
Um,
beautiful.
oh yeah, I forget what happened, and I just grabbed it off the shelf. And my grandfather's Bible, and here's a 1928 to 2018. He just passed away, but he was a dear
Oh,
friend, dear, dear, dear friend, good man.
awesome.
So anyway,
Okay,
great to be
I know
with you.
it's been awesome to be with you. So before I let you go, where can our listeners see more about what you do, find you?
Well, two different types of opportunities
Okay.
for folks that want to take a next step. If you want to do some coaching stuff, cool. You can hit me up. Email me, Adrian at takenewground.com. Better if you just Adrian.k on Instagram. Or I've got a really great team, depending on what you're up to and size and all that kind of stuff. Might make sense, might not make sense. Or
Mm.
you might find me absurd, which won't be the first time. But if you want to get after something, I promise you I'm helpful. But my team is helpful too. So anyway, that's the coaching stuff. Fine. Um, Most folks, two things. Let me be brief. One is we have a 4-day leadership training, personal leadership training called the Revenant Process. If you go to takenewground.com, go to public trainings. The Revenant Process is a 4-day training. I promise you, it'll be the most impactful leadership training you've done in your life. I promise you that.
Mm-hmm. I believe it.
It's very affordable, extremely affordable. Um, so I could go on forever about that. I won't. Go to the Revenant Process on the
Okay.
Take New Ground website. Number one, if you're a leader right now and want to immediately take huge leaps, come to
Yes.
our Intrepid training. And so we got a few spots left. It's a deep training. Like we're not like doing a seminar where you just take notes all day. No, you're in it, deeply in it.
Mm.
It's one weekend a month for 3 months. I went through both of these things. I was transformed by both. So once again, takenewground.com, public trainings, Intrepid Process. Don't mess around. If you are interested, go now and look. And if, message me, message the link there, apply, and let's have a conversation. But life's short. Stop wasting time. You'll feel guilty later. Just do it now. So
Awesome.
those are my thoughts.
Thank you,
Great.
sir.
Yeah, great to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us, taking a bit of your time.
Of course. An honor. An honor. Thank you for what you do.